This is the Grassroots Education and Entertainment Network, your number one source of information, education, and entertainment. For honest, responsible, and dependable information, we stand supreme. To stay focused, inspired, and relaxed, choose green.
Akabo, and welcome to the Ifagbemiro show. And I would like to open by doing an Iba. My reverence to Oludumare, the one that spreads all over the universe. Reverence to the dawn of the day. Reverence, the east I salute you, the west I salute you, the north I salute you, the south I salute you. Reverence to the sunset. Reverence to Mother Earth. Reverence to Orunmila, witness to creation. Reverence to the 200 Iromoles on the right-hand side of God. Reverence to the 200 Iromoles on the left-hand side of God. Reverence to the 401 Iromoles. This 401 Iromoles comprise 400 males and one female, which is Oshun. They were the ones that shuttled between heaven and earth at the primordial time. Reverence to Akoda, who was Orunmila's first Ifa student. Reverence to Asheda, who was Akoda's first Ifa student. Reverence to the mothers, the beautiful birds. Reverence to one's ancestors. Here, name the ancestors that you choose to mention. Reverence to one's father. Reverence to one's mother. Reverence to one's Oluwo. Reverence to one's Ojugbona. Reverence to one's Ianifa. Iba to the element of space. Iba to the element of time. And Iba to the element of movement. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And before I get into today's show topic and discussion, I want to answer a question that was asked from the last show by Olori Oriyomi Fakayode. The question was, so can you say that most times when consulting for a praise or feast at any particular Orisha, of any particular Orisha, it basically aligns its planet for the given time? So I think in a nutshell, the question was simply, when consulting or when the time has to be chosen to have a particular event, would it be necessary that the planets should be considered in making that decision? Well, the answer to that question is yes. Is it generally practiced? The answer is no. But I would go further to explain why it is necessary. The environment that we live in on planet Earth is influenced by many of the planets in our galaxy. But the one planet that we generally consider to have the greatest influence is the one that is closest to us, which is the moon. And as we all know, the moon affects tides, and it also, for those who are involved in agriculture, it dictates the success or failure they would have with having maximum or optimum yield when planting crops at particular times. These are just two examples. But in general, the influence of all the planets affect all activities on the earth, depending on the sphere of influence and their positions at a particular time. So the answer is yes, and it does not only apply for feasts and prayers. we should generally choose times that are suited to what is taking place in our natural environment to plan all our activities. All right, and I hope, Ia, that that was a satisfactory answer to your question. All right, so to move into today's topic, today again, we will be revisiting the topic of the 8 essences of Ifa. And I think we might be on this one topic for quite some time because there are so many aspects of these essences that we may not even be able to touch all of them. But at the same time, we're probably going to try to cover as many as we can. Uh, Last stream, the essence that we looked at was the scientific essence. And in particular, we looked at the issue of astronomy and astrology. Today, we are going to move forward. However, we're still going to be on the scientific essence, and we are going to look at logic, mathematics, and computer science. All right. So, before I start on those subjects, let me just read again what comprises the 8 essences of Ifa as a reminder, because this is something that every devotee should be familiar with. All right. This concept or this work, the concept didn't originate with Professor Adeyemi, but he was the one who put together the sequence and all the related information, of course, which he would have gathered from the elders into a very orderly fashion so that we could apply and have a clear understanding of these things in a table form. All right. Now, the 8 essences of Ifa. A thorough study of the ramification of Ifa shows that it comprises of 8 basic essences, which are as follows: the spiritual essence, the divine essence, the religious essence, the worship and sacrificial essence, the medicinal essence, the historical essence, the scientific essence, and last but not least, the cultural essence. All right, so today we are going to look at 3 of them, which is logic, maths, and computer science. All right, I'm going to try not to be overly technical, so I'm going to try to use very simple examples, as well as today I'm going to read some information out of a book that was written on the mechanics of the Ifa divination system by the author by the name of Ojo Oyebisi. All right, in this book, he goes into great details, right, and he proves using binary mathematics and logics the way in which the system was designed to function. All right, so today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk a little bit about the 3 aspects which I've mentioned, which is mathematics, logic, and computer science. All right, so first we will start with the issue of mathematics. Mathematics basically deals with issues such as calculations and measurements. So, with the use of mathematics, we are able to calculate as well as to measure things. All right, there are many areas in the field of mathematics, and the one that particularly relates to Ifa is what we call logic, which uses the system of what is called the binary number system. The binary number system composes mainly of ones and zeros. This number system is a number system that expresses any number as a sum of power of twos. And when we say powers of twos, we're referring to everything under 2, which will be 0 and 1. All right, there are many other number systems, like for instance, the one we have been taught from very young is the decimal number system that basically goes up to base 10. So therefore, all the numbers that are used in base 10 would be from 0 to 9. So all the numbers below 10. In the binary system, it's all the numbers below 2, which includes 0 and 1. Now I'm reading from the book directly. The Ifa divination system uses binary symbols in its divination technique. One vertical line, right? And sometimes two vertical lines. All right? The two symbols are based on complementary dualism of Tibetaya. And they can be arranged as a 4 times 2 matrix of octograms that can take up to 2 to the power 8. All right. Again, I said I wasn't going to get complicated. So I would try to use simple examples. Now, they mention 1 and 2, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, the binary system uses 0 and 1. So, where there is 2, that represents 1. And where there is 1, it is represented with 0. What does maths, binary, have to do with computer science? Okay, I'm going to explain this in the simplest terms I know how. All of the programs that were designed for computers, the entrance method used for programming the computers uses zeros and ones. So it does not matter how complicated a function is that is carried out in a computer, the information that is stored in that computer is stored in the forms of zeros and ones. And the term they use to describe these things is called logic. In mathematics, if you were to be dealing with the system of logic, you will discover that this process of reason and logic, what they attempt to do is they attempt to predict through calculation the outcome of a particular event. All right? So I hope from the examples I'm using and from what I'm describing that you can see there is a distinct relationship with Ifa, with maths, with logic, and with computer science. So, for all the young people who are in the Ifa community, I want you to know that a lot of the sciences that I use surrounding communication technology, computers, logic, reason, science, and mathematics, with particular emphasis on the binary number system, that it originated with our ancestors. Okay? You would have modern people who are proponents of the development of the system, but they were not the originators of the system. All right? Another thing I want to talk about a little bit, or I want to just mention, by the way, is there is a game, a traditional game that is played in West Africa. The name of the game is Ayo, right? Where there is a series of holes in a wood, and in the hole would have little balls that are used. It is a game used for entertainment and amusement, but this game also carries a spiritual significance. And normally, the tradition is that this particular game is normally played during the mourning period when there is a dead and there is rituals involved in sending the person off during the nights of what we in the Caribbean call the wake. Ayo is played for the entertainment of all of those who are departed and not just the one individual who is transitioning. All right? Now, beside Ayo being a form of entertainment, in other parts of Africa, beside Nigeria, it is also used as a tool for calculation. So it is also used as a calculator. All right? Many anthropologists have spoken about this. If you were to, do any research online, you're going to be able to find out about it being used as a system of computation, being entertainment, and also you might be able to find some information about the traditional spiritual use. All right? So that right there is the bulk of the information, right? But the system that I mentioned, the decimal system, right? But there are also other systems, the hexadecimal system, and the Chinese also use a different system also traditionally. All right, so there are various ways in which computation is done, right? And I'm going to again repeat something I said earlier, which is that modern computers, the input method for the interface, the input information is normally codified or broken down to the ones and zeros in order for it to be able to be stored in the memory of computers. So issues such as you have different forms of memory. You have two forms of memory in the computer system. You have the read-only memory and you have the random access memory. All right, not getting complicated. The read-only memory simply means you could only go in there and retrieve information. The random access memory means you could go in there and you could put information or you can alter information that is already there. And all of these things are done in a computer in what is called the CPU or the central processing unit. All right. Um, so, really, that concludes the lesson for today, which explains the three aspects of the scientific essence of Ifa as it relates to technology. All right. Beside those three things, under the scientific essence, we have the powers of observation. We have axiomatic astronomy, cosmology, cognitive and precognitive experience, astral science, physical science, logic, maths, natural science, and computer science. All right. Um, I don't know if any of the viewers may have any questions, but I always welcome questions on the show. All right. So if any of the viewers are on and they may have any questions, feel free to text or to send questions, and I would attempt to provide suitable answers for any questions that you may have. All right. Again, let me tell you a little bit about the show. The show is basically designed to provide basic information about the concepts of Ifa. I am not a Babalawo. I am not an Ifa expert. I'm a person who does research. I'm a devotee also. So what I do is information that I am familiar with and information that I know, I try to share it so that people who have no knowledge of Ifa Orisa could acquire some level of understanding as to what it is about. The particular streams that I do is also designed not just for persons who do not know in Trinidad, but it's also for persons in the region who wants to know more about the Ifa Orisa tradition. In Trinidad, the tradition is a very old tradition, and by that I mean it came to Trinidad when our ancestors arrived here. The same would apply to other parts of the Caribbean. Fortunately for us in Trinidad and maybe a couple of the other islands, we were able to keep and maintain the tradition despite all the harsh, oppressive activities and events that took place during the slave trade. All right? What has happened is a lot of our ancestors would meet in secret conclaves at unusual hours in order to be able to practice their tradition. All right? With a lot of very harsh and oppressive restriction on the slave populations, our ancestors were not allowed to practice their tradition freely. It is not until the abolition of slavery, at which time and around that time, and even after that time, that you had free Africans coming to Trinidad and living in Trinidad, as a result of which many of the things that were probably lost through a couple of generations would have been reinstated. All right. And even at that time, after slavery was abolished, you had uh, the resurgence or the popularity of the tradition increasing among African people in Trinidad. All right. And even during that time, after slavery ended, still the colonial authorities attempted to try to curb or to try to control the number of persons practicing the tradition. All right. By introducing specific laws that limited and restricted the practice of African tradition in Trinidad. All right. So, with that, I'm simply saying that we are fortunate to have had in the 70s the reintroduction of Ifa into Trinidad. All right. And why would I say reintroduction? The reason I say reintroduction is because many of the practices of Ifa was lost, but there are still songs that would have indicated that we knew of the practice of Ifa. And as far as divining and the practices associated to divining, our ancestors locally did in fact have methods of divining. Now, one of the things that would, of course, up till today make our practice different. Well, two things actually. One is the time that many of our ancestors left Nigeria to come to Trinidad. What they left in Nigeria, the practice that was there at the time, they would have preserved it here. So while there would have been a lot of changes taking place in Nigeria, whether it be through war, invasion, civil war, other tribes from other parts of Africa coming into West Africa, the changes that would have occurred there would not have occurred here in the Caribbean. Okay, so that would explain for some of our unique aspects of our practices. Another factor that would have figured into making some aspect of our culture unique is that not all of the materials that were involved in rituals and practices that are very present in West Africa were not present here, which would mean, of course, that we would have had to adapt and we would have had to find whatever raw material was available to use in order to carry out our traditional rites. All right? So these things made us unique in that sense, while at the same time, we have maintained a great part of the tradition, including a lot of the songs that we sing up till today. If you were to ever experience ceremonies in a pali, the series of songs that are sung, which is referred to by some as the litany, it would be very different from the way songs are sung in other parts of the Caribbean, in other parts of South America, in other parts of Central America, and even North America. However, there are some songs that are sung in all of the countries that practice the Yoruba tradition or the Ifa Orisa tradition. All right. And you would have heard, from some of the other programs that I normally sit in on or co host, you would have heard me speak about many of the countries that also practice the Ifa Orisa tradition. Countries such as Cuba, the USA, Brazil, Jamaica, Suriname, Haiti, and many other countries. And in each country, even though we all practice Ifa Orisha and Yoruba tradition, which is the tradition of our ancestors, you would find peculiar or differences existing in the practices because of other cultural influences. All right. In Trinidad, for example, I'll give an example. If you were to hear the names that are used in the pantheons that are used in many of the palais, in many of the rural districts, you would hear some of the deities being mentioned that are not currently used in Nigeria. The reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is that in Trinidad and Tobago, we did not only have Yoruba people coming in to be used as labor under the slave system. We had people from other parts of West Africa. We had people from Central Africa. We had some from North Africa, and we had also from East Africa. So basically, what would have happened over the years is the African groups that had the largest number would have exerted a more dominant effect on the practices. So today, in most palais, all of the songs are predominantly sung in the version of Yoruba that came with our early ancestors. So some of these songs would not match up with the modern Yoruba songs that is sung in Nigeria. Some of them wouldn't match up with some of the songs that are sung in Brazil. All right? Because even Brazil have a different history to Trinidad, where you had people coming from Benin to one part of Brazil called Bahia. So even their practice of Ifa Orisha and Orisha is somewhat different. In Trinidad too, we had people coming from Benin, from Dahomey. All right, we have the Kampong in Belmont, and these people are not Yoruba people, but they are of the family of Yoruba people because of the tradition and the practice. We had people coming here from Liberia and Sierra Leone, the Mende people and other groups, and they are also Yoruba speaking people, but of course they would have had some slight differences in the way in which they spoke and practiced the tradition. And all of these things has been brought together in Trinidad in the form of Orisha practice. So believe it when you would hear some of the elders saying, we are all one people. And we are indeed a melting pot in Trinidad with all the different cultures that we experience. All right, so with this, I would like to close today's program and say Odabo and thank you for the time. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. Odabo.